This is my March book review. It was a little bit of a slower month for me. School's just getting really busy, but I listened to a lot of audiobooks, so a lot of these are going to be audiobooks, but I did end up buying a couple of the audiobooks as physical books, and then plus I've been reading through, well, we'll get to it, but I've been reading through the Stormlight Archive series, so I have those as physical books as well. The first book that I read this month was Beartown by Frederick Bachman. It was so beautifully written. I absolutely loved it. It's a contemporary fiction novel. It's very popular. You've maybe read it, but if you haven't heard about it, it follows this town in Sweden where everything revolves around hockey. It reminds me a lot of small towns near where I grew up, and something awful ends up happening in this town, and everyone kind of has to grapple with how important hockey really is to them and where is the line drawn and how much pressure is too much pressure to be putting on these high school, hockey players. I really liked it. It was a little slow at some points, but I think this is one that I'm definitely going to go back and reread as a physical book. I think I'll get more out of it. There's a lot of different POVs in this book. It basically revolves around everyone's opinion of what this awful thing that happened in the entire town. I mean, there's got to be like a dozen characters. And at the beginning, it was really confusing because when you're listening on audiobook and it's just one narrator, sometimes it's really hard to tell apart all these different POVs. So I think on a reread, it'll make more sense. The second book that I ended up finishing was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in the Stormlight Archive. I don't even know what to say at this point. I'll probably do a video just talking about the Stormlight Archive because at this point I have finished it now. Everyone says this is their favorite in the series from what I've heard. I don't know if it's quite my favorite. I gave it 5 stars, but I don't know if it was quite my favorite. I think the third one, which I'll talk about later, was my favorite, but I mean, I don't know that there's a single flaw in this book. I mean, it's beautifully well written. I love Shallan's story, which the first 3 books follow the backstory of one of the major characters. So this one's all about Shallan, and I just love her story. There's Shallan haters out there, and I don't understand it because I'm a Shallan girly. We love her. So yeah, like I said, 5 stars. I really, really liked it. Next I read one of the novellas. There's 2 of them for the Stormlight Archives. So the first one is Edgedancer, also obviously Brandon Sanderson. This one follows one of the characters that's in one of the interludes in the second book. Her name's Lift, and she's this like 14-year-old, really spunky, kind of a little annoying. Some people don't like her, and I can see how people could find her annoying. At first, especially in the interlude with her, I was kind of like, I don't know about this. But after getting to spend some more time with her and her later appearances in the later books, I really, really like her as a character. I think she's really fun. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I don't think it's anything amazingly spectacular, but I love the world, and it's got some great world building in it, and it sets up a character that, I mean, not just Lift, but another character that also ends up being important later in the series. So it was good for what it was for world building, and I liked Lift, and it got me to like her more, but it didn't, go to any great heights or anything. The next book I read, so this was all spring break. I basically read like the 2 big Stormlight books, so this one and then Words of Radiance, and then 2 novellas, all like a week. So it was a lot of reading for me, but that's the best part about spring break. So anyways, this is Oathbringer. This is the 3rd book. I would say this is probably my favorite. It's a little bit slower, which is saying something considering they're all just absolutely huge books. But I would say this is a little slower, especially the first half. I mean, we all know about the Sanderlanche, and I think this one has the best Sanderlanche out of all of them. Absolutely 5-star read, if I didn't say that already. I love this book. Like I said, I think it has the best Sanderlanche, which is what people call the last like 100 to 200 pages of Brandon Sanderson books, where it's just like, it feels like a Marvel movie. It's amazing. I mean, this has like an endgame moment where like everyone shows up and it's so badass. This one follows Dalinar's backstory, which at first I wasn't super into. I thought it got a little repetitive. Like, they kept establishing over and over again that, yeah, Dalinar used to be a piece of shit back in the day, which is like, kind of knew that already, but it went more in different directions than I thought it would. Set up, like I said, I mean, just the world building. So I really, really, really liked it. And Rhythm of War, which I read this month in April, was good, but it definitely didn't get to the heights of this book. So it's between this one and the second book for my favorites. The Way of Kings is really good. It's hard to pick a favorite, but yeah, I would say this one's probably my favorite. So next I read the last novella in the Stormlight, and this is Dawnshard. This follows another character who's in the interludes, I think in all 3 of the books prior to the novella coming out, I think. Unless she's just in 2 of them, but I think she's in all 3. Her name's Risen? Risen, I think is how you say her name. And I won't spoil anything, I guess, really, because her story takes place in the interludes and then gets expanded upon here. But she has some really great, like, disability representation in fantasy, which I don't know if you guys saw that tweet, but people are like, you can't have disabled characters in fantasy. This is a great example of how you absolutely can have disabled characters in fantasy, and they can be written very, very well. I only ended up giving this a 3.5, just because Risen as a character was only moderately interesting. I mean, I really like the Phelan, which is what her race of people, or I guess her country of people, is like. I think they're really interesting, and they have like really long eyebrows that they like bead with jewelry and like braid into their hair, and I don't know, I just think there's some really interesting world building stuff going on with the Phelan, but there's some other, I don't know, fantasy stuff that didn't really click with me in this. It was fine, don't get me wrong, but not my favorite. So I only ended up giving it a 3.5, but still enjoyable. Definitely worth reading if you're going through the Stormlight archives. I think if you're going to read them, I mean, might as well throw this tiny little book in the mix. You know, it takes a couple hours to get through. So next on audiobook, I listened to Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I don't know if that's how you say her name. I didn't really know what to expect. I knew this was a really popular book back when I was in high school, and I thought that it'd be good. I've heard mildly good things about it. I didn't really look at Goodreads reviews before I picked it up. I was just like, oh, it's available on audiobook. I was like, sure. I mean, I'll listen to it. I only ended up giving it a 2.5. I thought the story was kind of cute, but a lot of the characters just ended up being really annoying and not really enjoyable. I've read romance novels. I know what it's supposed to be like, and this wasn't it. And at the time, I thought maybe it was just because audiobook romance books weren't for me, but I've since listened to some on audiobook, and that's definitely not the case. So there's something about this book. If you don't know, it follows the first son of the president, so the son of the president of the United States, and then the Prince of England as they fall in love. I think the romance was really sweet, but all of the characters just acted like horny 13-year-olds. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, these people are supposed to be in their like early to mid 20s, and they're acting like junior high like, I don't understand why they're so immature. It's like, especially when you're the son of either the king or the son of the president, like you gotta step up your game a little bit. I mean, I get it, like boys are supposed to be like a little immature, but like this is a little too much. There's also like a dumb miscommunication trope, which I hate those. And then another thing, which I think is just a personal preference thing, but the main characters end up getting together like around 30% or less than 30% of the way through the book. And the last 70% is just made up problems to justify the length of the book being that long. Like, oh, we miscommunicated. Oh, there's some bullshit going on with the campaign that I don't care about. And they try to put some like political statements in there, which were appreciated, but really poorly weaved into the story. I felt like it didn't like really mesh. It was okay, but it didn't blow me away. It was cute. It is what it is. Next, I ended up listening to Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow on audiobook. And this is one that I ended up picking up as a physical copy just because at Target they had buy 2, get 1 free. And I was like, perfect, I will take a free book. Thank you. Yeah, so this is by Gabrielle Zevin. If you don't know Lexi Newly Nova on YouTube here, this is like her favorite book ever. And I don't know that I would go that far. I gave it a 4.5. Which was maybe a little generous. I think I probably enjoyed it a little closer to a 4, but it's one that I know I need to reread. There's a lot of stuff that I missed because I either wasn't paying close enough attention to the audiobook, or I didn't understand it because, I don't know, something about audiobooks, sometimes if I need to pay attention, otherwise I miss stuff. So this is definitely one I want to reread. That's why I got the physical copy. I'll go through, I'll probably annotate some of it like I did with other books and try to put it together. I went into this book thinking it was a romance, and I think it kind of is marketed as a romance. It is not a romance. I don't know where, don't go into it thinking it's a romance. It is absolutely not. It is a contemporary, like, fictional, literary fiction kind of story. It follows these 2 video game developers who they met as kids, and then they reconnect in college, and then it follows them over the next, I think it's like 30 years, as they develop games together and go through ups and downs and fall in love with other people and date and whatever. And Sam, one of the main characters, he has a disability, and it's kind of him trying to learn to cope with that. And there's tons of really important messages in here. There's also, because it's about video games in like the 90s through like 2010s, there's a lot of references to those, which I think if you're into video games, you'll really like, because I picked up on a lot of them, and a lot I didn't understand because I wasn't really into video games from the 90s, because I wasn't alive in the 90s. The characters are just really relatable. They're very, very sweet. They're definitely flawed, but I think their decisions all made sense. Very different to Red, White, and Royal Blue. Everyone acts the age that they're supposed to. When they're college kids, they act a little immature, but, you know, like adults. And then when they're 30, they're acting like 30-year-olds and not still like 13-year-olds. So I ended up docking half a star because there's some parts that I found were a little slow and a little boring, particularly in the middle. But like I said, I think if I reread it, I would pick up on that a little more, and I would enjoy it a little more. Yeah, there's also a lot of like extended family and friends that get stories in here, which I didn't particularly care about those characters as much. I only cared about kind of the main cast, and these kind of side characters were getting more attention than the main cast at some points in the middle, which is what I think I didn't like about that. Very, very sweet and sad, very sad story. And I did enjoy it. Obviously, I gave it 4.5. I'll have to give it a reread in this physical edition. Like I said, I think I'll get more out of it. So next I went on a little bit of a memoir binge. Well, I read 2, but the first one that I read was by Matthew Perry, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. And if you don't know, Matthew Perry is Chandler from Friends. And I gave it 4 stars. I listened to an audiobook, and he narrates it. And it was very sad. I mean, obviously his story is very sad. If you don't know, he struggles a lot with addiction and loneliness, and mostly just addiction. A lot of the book is just him struggling with going in and out of, you know, rehab clinics and using and all that sort of stuff. The whole theme of the book is basically that he doesn't want to be alone anymore. Like, his whole life he's been screwing up relationships and friendships and whatever, and he's tired of being alone, and he just wants to settle down, get married, and have kids and enjoy the rest of his life. And it's so sad knowing that. I don't know exactly when this book was written, but within a few years, I'm pretty sure, of this book coming out, he ends up dying due to, you know, complications with his drug addiction. He tried to keep it very light, but it ended up being way heavier just because I knew what happened afterwards. It was very sweet. It was very sad. I think this is another book that I want to pick up later as a physical copy. Probably not to reread, but just to have, because I feel like this, you know, like Friends is such a huge part of like American history, basically, at this point. And Matthew Perry was a big part of that. Chandler was definitely my favorite character on Friends. So I just feel like this is something that I want to own. And then last, as part of my memoir binge, I ended up reading The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This was just one that was available on Libby. I didn't have to wait for it. So I was just like, oh, well, I'll pick it up. I already read one memoir. And I ended up giving this 3 stars. I'm sorry, Britney Spears, but I don't know. Her life is sad, sure. Her father was very abusive, and then she ended up getting stuck in that conservatorship with him. I mean, I enjoyed the story. I don't know much about her outside of that. Basically, when I went into the story, is I knew about her conservatorship, and I knew, like, obviously I knew some of her songs, but that was pretty much all I knew, the Free Britney movement. And I'd say I have a lot more respect for her now. I know a lot of people make fun of her because she acts really weird online, which is fair. But I think if for the last, like, 10 years or however long that was, if I was, like, my whole entire life, what I ate, when I exercised, when I slept, when I performed, what I performed was all controlled by my abusive father, I'd probably have a little bit of a mental breakdown right after that. And the biggest point, I think, is her writing style wasn't strong enough to support the stories that she was trying to tell. The stories were interesting at their core, but I just don't think she conveyed them in a very interesting way. It was pretty, I don't know, standard, I guess I would say. It wasn't as captivating as Matthew Perry's was. And I also think Matthew Perry did a good job of, like, tying in humor to his story. Like, even though it was very tragic, like I said, he tried his best to keep it light, where Britney Spears' story felt very just one awful thing happened, and then another awful thing happened, and another awful thing happened, and she didn't, I mean, understand her life was awful, but you have to, as a reader, you don't want to just feel like crap the entire time you're reading it, so you have to kind of, like, tie in something lighter-hearted or whatever. I don't know. Something about it just didn't click for me. So I only gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it. I think her story was interesting, but it wasn't amazing. That makes sense. Anyways, that was all I ended up reading. How many books is that? Well, I ended up reading 9 books this month. Like I said, a little bit lighter, but I'm already doing better this month. Lots of audiobooks. Again, I think it just works out really well. I can listen to them at work, I can listen to them in the car, at school, wherever. It's a good multitasking thing. So I highly recommend audiobooks. Get Libby. Support your local library. They're important. But anyways, yeah, thanks for hanging out with me and learning about some of my books. I'm a little sick, so if you notice me sniffling, I will try to cut them all out. But if you notice me sniffling or heavily breathing, because I can't breathe out of my nose, that would be why. I am a little sick. But anyways, thanks for stopping by. And I hope this was interesting, and I hope you check out some of these books, especially highly recommend. I mean, this is the second book, but Way of King. Read Way of Kings. It's very, very good. If you like fantasy, Way of King. Maybe not for your first fantasy book. Okay, anyways, bye.